say.
Well, that's right, Zaka. In fact, we are going door to door here in the national capital, perhaps to dig more about Operation Sindoor. And in fact, we have spoken to many officers in the government, in the armed forces, at the Ministry of External Affairs office, and perhaps there is indeed chatter, and in fact, amidst speculation and the claims that Pakistan has made about India's military loss in Operation Sindoor, perhaps. There is a lot of criticism also that Indian forces are not owning up, etc., etc. So, a senior official in the government of India, perhaps I can't name him, Zaka, but he has said this to me, and in fact, I would like to read it out for our viewers, and I quote him: "हम दुश्मनी में भी शराफत रखते हैं." And he went on to remind me that how Pakistan's captain, Karnal Sher Khan, was awarded the Nishan-e-Haider on the recommendation of an Indian officer. Perhaps he says that India has a proud and consistent history of acknowledging its losses and honoring the brave hearts who lay down their lives in the service of the nation. In fact, Operation Sindoor is ongoing. As always, we will provide verified details at an appropriate time. Zaka, I have spoken to other officers also. In fact, what they are telling me is that this is not a right time. For any minor detail perhaps going out in media about the operations could affect the future, future success of operations. And this is the reason that, there is a blanket silence as far as these chatter and, claims that Pakistan is making and the speculative stories that are getting published in the foreign media. So, the message is very clear that Indian Army, Indian forces are known for their professional conduct. And perhaps this time around, they are also doing in a very professional manner. It's just a matter of a time since Operation Sindoor is going on. So, before divulging details or perhaps putting out details in public domain, the armed forces are very cautious. The government is very cautious so that Pakistan should not take a mileage of slightest detail being put out in public domain.
All right, Siddhant, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm now joined by former diplomat and former Deputy National Security Advisor, former High Commissioner, Mr. Satish Chandra. Ambassador Satish Chandra, thank you very much. You speak very rarely to television channels, so thank you very much for joining us here on CNN News 18. I just laid out the context of what has happened over the last 2 weeks and where we stand as of today. What is your best assessment of what the situation is right now, and more importantly, where do you see it moving over the next 24, 48 hours?
Good to be with you, Zaka, on your channel. It's a pleasure to interact with you. Well, actually, what's been happening is a repetition of the playbook over the decades. India has always been extremely restrained, to a fault often, in terms of retaliatory steps. I think all of us are very well aware that we have been targets of terrorist actions by Pakistan, and in most cases we have not retaliated, and I think that's been a fault and perhaps has encouraged Pakistan in the belief that they can literally get away with murder. So what has happened, I think there's been a change since with the Modi government in terms of the actions that it had taken in 2016 and 2019. First the surgical strikes and then Balakot. And this has gone a notch higher in terms of depth at which we have struck across Pakistan in retaliation for the Pahalgam attacks. And it's been nine camps which has been struck, both in some in POK and some in Pakistan, Punjab. The most notable being Muridke and Bahawalpur, where the terrorist camps were taken out. But as you mentioned ab initio, and as has been underlined by the government of India, that our action was, the kinetic action was extremely restrained in terms of the fact that we did not hit the military, the Pakistan military, which many feel perhaps we should have.
All right. Sorry for interrupting that interview, but we've got these pictures from the Prime Minister's residence. The Prime Minister having a meeting earlier today with the Defence Minister, the three service chiefs, the National Security Advisor, the service chiefs, of course, of the Army, Navy and Air Force. There seems to be, of course, the body language, of course, everyone seems to be in a slightly more relaxed frame of mind. It was very different from the images that we had a couple of days ago, which the Prime Minister had met with the service chiefs as well as the National Security Advisor and the Defence Minister. I want to go across to our political editor Aman Sharma, who has more on this. Aman, so this is from the meeting that the Prime Minister had earlier. Visible difference in the body language from the first meeting that we had, pictures of which a few days ago. Clearly, there seems to be a degree of comfort in what India has achieved through Operation Sindoor and a degree of surety that India can handle whatever it is that Pakistan is trying to achieve.
Absolutely, Zaka. These pictures show that the Prime Minister is extremely happy with the performance of the armed forces, not just during Operation Sindoor, but also yesterday, earlier today, in the wee hours when we have repulsed all these 300 to 400 drones fired at 36 locations of India, right from Leh till Sir Creek, as the details were given in the press conference earlier. It seems that the Prime Minister and the Defence Minister are extremely happy with the performance of our armed forces of repulsing, such a massive attack. And earlier in the day, we also saw the Defence Minister meeting the chiefs of the armed forces and the CDS, and where also the body language seemed far more comfortable, far more easy. And it seems that the Prime Minister in this meeting also has been told about how the armed forces went about, retaliating to Pakistan's attack and diffusing all the threats that were fired our way. The details which were given in the press conference. So I think the government looking very, very confident and prepared to retaliate if Pakistan does any other misadventure.
And what is the sense you're also getting from the government that if Pakistan does not do any misadventure, as you said, then is India not looking to amp up on the escalation ladder? Is India only now keen to be seen as responding if Pakistan chooses to escalate this?
Well, yes, Zaka, it is very difficult actually to anticipate what the government could do next, because these are very operational decisions based on strategy and planning. But whatever we heard at the press conference earlier today, the Foreign Secretary saying that our response was measured and our response was responsible. So I think those words indicate that India only responded to the drone attack by Pakistan by sending our own drones and in fact bringing down one of the radars in Pakistan. So India is only responding if Pakistan chooses to retaliate. India's objectives, so by and far, have been achieved by Operation Sindoor, which happened on May the 7th.
Any more further, information that you're picking up in terms of, obviously the guard is up. Flight traffic across the northern and western, particularly in the northwestern corridor, the western front, as it were, has been disrupted. The NOTAMs have been issued. What is the outlook, at least for the next few days? Clearly, like I said, the guard is up, but what does India anticipate in terms of escalatory action from Pakistan?
See, Zaka, I think India is on high alert, and especially the statement which was made at the press conference yesterday by the Foreign Secretary that this drone attack which happened yesterday was also for the purpose of intelligence gathering and to know the readiness of our defense system. So clearly, India does anticipate that Pakistan could replicate such an attack again. This may not be the end from Pakistan, because Pakistan is very, very desperate, also the Pakistani army, to show to its population that it has effectively retaliated against India. But what happened last night was not as per what the Pakistan army had desired to achieve. All its attacks were repulsed by India. So, of course, India is on high alert. India still feels that Pakistan will not give up on such attempts. But given the success which we have seen through Operation Sindoor and also the action last night, India is very confident that it will be able to thwart any such attacks made by Pakistan, because our weaponry and our resolve is far, far bigger than that of Pakistan.
And just one final word, just going back to the press conference earlier today, where I think it was a concerned decision that was taken to name the fact that some of these drones were Turkish made, and also at the same time not mention any Chinese-made weapons, even though from the ground we seem to get reports from our reporters and pictures of these weapons, these debris, which seem to suggest that some of these drones or missiles were Chinese-made. What do you make of that?
The involvement of that was sent to India for the attack by Pakistan was Turkish-made has raised big concerns in the government, Zaka, because Turkey has been a country on which India, has gone out of its way to help. We remember the 2023 earthquake when India began Operation Dost. India was one of the first countries to send aid and material to Turkey to tide over that crisis. But Turkey clearly in this whole conflict between India and Pakistan seems to have chosen the Pakistan camp. In fact, there are big doubts now that this plane from Turkey, which landed in Karachi on April 28th, and subsequent high-level military delegation of Turkey, which paid visit to Islamabad, on April the 30th and had met the Pakistan air chief. Does that have a connection with this huge number of 300 to 400 drones of Turkish origin which have attacked India? India is very concerned about that, and I think that is why India has named that Turkey today in its press conference to say that Turkey, it seems to be siding clearly with Pakistan in this whole conflict.
Okay, Aman, we'll leave it at that. Thanks very much. Those pictures from earlier today, the Prime Minister meeting the three service chiefs, the National Security Advisor and the Defence Minister. Now, I want to go back to that press conference that was addressed by Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri and the two armed forces personnel from the Army and the Indian Air Force. One of the things that the Foreign Secretary mentioned was the attack on Bahawalpur, which is the headquarters of the Jaish-e-Mohammed. There's a lot of speculation around whether Rauf Azhar, who was one of the key members of the Jaish-e-Mohammed, the brother of the founder of the Jaish-e-Mohammed, Masood Azhar, whether he was eliminated, whether he was killed in that attack that happened a couple of nights ago on Operation Sindoor. Now, Rauf Azhar was the person who was responsible for luring American journalist, the Wall Street Journal reporter Daniel Pearl, and taking him to Omar Sheikh, who then killed him. This was, of course, a case from many, many years ago. I want to first play out what the Foreign Secretary said. He didn't name Rauf Azhar, but of course, like I said, this speculation has been doing the rounds for the last 24 hours that one of the high-value targets, one of the high-value hits in the Operation Sindoor happened to be Rauf Azhar. Let's listen into what the Foreign Secretary said, and then I'll go across to a friend of Daniel Pearl's to try and get some perspective on that.
You brought up the connection with the tragic death or killing of Daniel Pearl of the Wall Street Journal. The Jaish-e-Mohammed was in some way directly or indirectly responsible for the death of Daniel Pearl. But the real connection is through Ahmed Omar Saeed Sheikh, the British Pakistani jihadi who was held in India, but was finally released in 2000, and he was the person who lured Daniel Pearl to his eventually leading to his murder. So these are all obviously connected figures, connected individuals, connected institutions, and the attack on Bahawalpur, on that facility of the Jaish-e-Mohammed in Bahawalpur is, I would imagine, a fitting part of this unfortunate incident.
I stand corrected. It was Omar Sheikh who lured Daniel Pearl and eventually, of course, to his tragic killing. Asra Nomani is an Indian-American journalist and a former colleague of Daniel Pearl's. She now joins us. Asra, thank you very much for speaking with us. I know there's been a lot of speculation around whether Rauf Azhar was killed or not, but the Bahawalpur headquarters of the Jaish-e-Mohammed has been reduced to rubble. When you saw those pictures, when you heard that news, what did you feel? What went through your mind?
It was haunting for me to see Bahawalpur on the map, because Bahawalpur has been on my map for 23 years. It was where Daniel Pearl went in December 2001, when he was on the trail of the jihadis that have caused so much violence in the world, from India to the United States to Europe. And so Danny went to Bawalpur. He knocked on the door of Jaish-e-Mohammed, and he saw that despite the claims of General Pervez Musharraf, it was open for business. And what Danny discovered was what we all have known for these decades, that Pakistan has been fomenting a terrorism industry with a headquarters in Bawalpur. So it was haunting to see Bawalpur on the map now as one of the places where India struck. It's really important for me to recognize that why this family is important is because Ibrahim, the brother of Masood Azhar, was one of the hijackers on that airplane in 1999 that went from Kathmandu to Kandahar. The man that was killed this week, Masood Azhar, he is the brother and he was the mastermind of that hijacking. So what happened was that Omar Sheikh was freed because of that hijacking. So I want to just correct the record that this family was not involved in the actual plot to kidnap Danny, just as you mentioned. It was this man, Omar Sheikh.
Yeah.
But it was this industry that created these jihadis that murdered Danny. And that's why it's so important what has happened.
I just wanted to ask you about that. I mean, look, no government official has come forth and confirmed that Rauf Azhar has died. There's a lot of speculation that he was amongst the high-value targets inside Bahawalpur when it was struck on the night of 7th of, or the morning of the 7th of May, when India carried out Operation Sindoor. Have you been able to hear from, either people on the ground in Pakistan, or have you heard from any government official about this operation taking out the man who killed your friend?
I have not. And I think that would be really wonderful if the government of India did communicate with Danny's father. His mother passed away, and his father is very engaged in this battle. His father has fought to keep the men that were convicted in Danny's murder in jail. And we have failed because the Pakistani court system has released those men essentially to house arrest and, very convenient, a good life in Pakistan. And so I would invite that kind of communication. And I know that Danny's dad is very relieved that this issue is in the front again, because the truth is justice has been denied Danny Pearl all these years.
All right, Asra Namani, we share your sense of grief, sense of hurt, sense of loss, and now hopefully, in some measure, a sense of closure and sense of justice more than closure about losing your friend Daniel Pearl, and now the killers being avenged. Thank you for joining us, Asra. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I want to move on back to the developments around the situation between India and Pakistan. In an exclusive interview with India's ambassador to the United States, Vinay Quatra, he again reiterated the government of India's position that what India is seeking to do is not go to war with Pakistan, it is to go to war with these terrorists. He said explicitly so when he was pressed by Wolf Blitzer at CNN whether India was at war with Pakistan. He said, no, it's not with Pakistan, but with terrorism and with terrorists. Listen in to this exclusive conversation.
It looks like the situation, the tensions between these two nuclear-powered countries, India and Pakistan, is escalating. Is that true?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the CNN. When you talk of tensions and when you talk of escalation, what I would say is that the original escalation or the original breakout of tension happened on 22nd of April, when you had 4 terrorists backed by Pakistan carried out killings, brutal killings, subhuman, monstrous kind of killings of 26 civilians.
Indian civilians.
25 of them Indian nationals, 1 of them Nepali national. And the brutality of the killings, they essentially killed them in front of their innocent wives, in front of their innocent children. They gave them headshots, and they did so on the basis of religion. So they killed all non-Muslims who were there in the group. They identified their religion, and then they went on to proceed to kill them. So what we did day before yesterday was essentially our response to terror, our response to these subhuman.
When you say what you did yesterday, meaning the escalation
Day
in the
before
military
yesterday.
response.
As I said, the original escalation was on 22nd of April, and when that happened, we had clearly said that we are a responsible country. We will have a very measured, calibrated, proportionate, responsible response, and that's what we did day before yesterday. What we did was we took out the terror factories at 9 locations in Pakistan and in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Took them out where they trained them, they equipped them, they armed them, they organized them. Those are the facilities which we took out. We were very careful in excluding the military establishment, the social structures, and economic infrastructure. We were very, very cautious, careful in keeping our targets only to those people and their backers who carried out these dastardly killings on the 22nd.
All right, it's not just the Indian ambassador to the United States. The Indian High Commissioner to the UK has also spoken with the international press in an exclusive interview with Sky News. He showed, Vikram Doraiswamy, he showed proof of military backing to terrorists in Pakistan. He showed a photograph which shows Pakistani military officers standing behind an internationally sanctioned terrorist. Let's play out what that interview was all about and who is this internationally sanctioned terrorist that Vikram Doraiswamy was alluding to.
High Commissioner, I just have a minute left, but I've spoken to a retired general who, in Pakistan, who referenced India funding and backing the Baloch Liberation Army. They've said that they have done that for years, and when I asked him about Masood Azhar, he said, well, their family members were targeted. Should we be doing the same to, the high-level militants from the BLA, the Baloch Liberation Army, that are seen and operate within Delhi?
Well, look, let me show you this photograph of yesterday, I believe it is, to your viewers. This person here is a sanctioned terrorist under the American sanctions regime. His name is Hafiz Abdur Rauf. He's a brother of the founder of the terrorist groups that you're mentioning. Look who's behind him, Pakistani military. Look at the coffins there. They have the Pakistani national flag. If you're going to be giving terrorists state funerals, what does that make of your system? And everybody knows that for the last 30 years, Pakistan has used this as a means of subcritical warfare against India. If the international community really wants to be able to look at this and worry about it, the simple solution is to tell Pakistan it has an opportunity for an off-ramp. These are things that the world should have compelled Pakistan to do 30 years ago, and to compel them to implement their promises about taking down this infrastructure. It has not done so.
There is an information warfare that's taking place, and independent journalists can't seem to get access to either side.
Well, look, it is a fluid situation out there. I don't know how helpful it would be to have independent journalists or any kind of journalists wandering around in an area where there is active military operations happening. The logical solution would be, as we've said repeatedly, for Pakistan to take the opportunity of an off-ramp, which we have made abundantly clear, including this morning, that if Pakistan stops attacking our military facilities, the matter ends there. But it is for them to decide.
All right, we're just getting some breaking news before we close out the show. There's been a massive blackout followed with siren sounds that have been activated in Udhampur, a complete blackout in Udhampur. Also, multiple ceasefire violations happening across different sectors on either side of the line of control. So not yet quite the repeat of what we saw yesterday, but still heavy artillery firing happening on across the LOC. Akash has more details on this. Akash, so is it restricted to CFE violations and artillery shells right now? Are we seeing any kind of drone activity yet? Is there any possibility of a repeat of what happened yesterday, or it's following a familiar pattern?
I'm hearing the sirens. In fact, here in Jammu, I'm not allowed to go outside because of the light and some sort of restrictions that are in place. Zaka, yes, we are learning about one drone attack here in Jammu. In fact, defense sources are telling us, and we have heard multiple firing sounds as well. You rightly pointed out on line of control, we are having ceasefire violations in different sectors, not only in Jammu, but in Kashmir as well. In Uri and Kupwara, we have been reporting since evening And at this point in time, in Poonch and in Samba, we are learning about this ceasefire violation from Pakistan, where they are in fact firing the artillery. Here in Jammu, I have heard multiple sounds. I was trying to count 11 at least. I have heard, and I am learning. In fact, defense forces are telling me that it was, drone once again. It was a drone attack once again. We'll wait for the police to confirm it as well. But I am learning that yesterday it was the airport, and once again it is in the close vicinity, possibly the airport only. And agencies are in fact using the AD systems and AD guns to thwart these attempts. Once again, it is Pakistan trying to attack the infrastructure, and not only in Jammu. We have been learning about these sort of activities in different areas. Tejinder is reporting in fact about Pathankot and Samba as well. We have a colleague Anshul and Anvit in different areas as well. They have been reporting about blackout and sirens. But as far as Jammu is concerned, Zaka, so it is very important. It is the international border, though, but it's a very part of the sort of attack that was carried out. In fact, yesterday it got started with Jammu only, and at around 8 p.m. This evening also. We heard sirens, and soon after that a blackout was there. Yes, it's a precautionary measure, Zaka, but it has been categorically mentioned by the police and the civil authorities that people cannot stay, outdoor, and in fact they need to go inside whenever they are hearing these sort of sounds, and in fact whenever there is blackout, they need to go indoors.
Okay, Akash, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much. So, yes, ceasefire violations are happening in Samba, in Uri, in Tangdar, all across the line of control. Akash, they're reporting that one drone was reportedly intercepted in Samba and one drone intercepted in Jammu. As of now, it seems sporadic. It seems, restricted to one or two places. We're not seeing a swarm of drones like we saw yesterday, but I don't want to jinx it. We'll leave it at that. Rahul Shivshankar, my colleague, will take it forward. All right, we're just getting some breaking news before we close out the show. There's been a massive blackout followed with siren sounds that have been...
Hello and welcome to the continuous coverage of the border tensions between India and Pakistan as Bharat gives a befitting reply to the terror state. I'm Ayushman Singh Jamwal. Now, Pakistan launched drone strikes along the border targeting Jaisalmer, Rajouri, Amritsar, Firozpur, Riyasi, Kathua, Samba, Nagrota and Uri. India has successfully brought down the drones to deter Pakistan's design. Ceasefire violations continue along the line of control and the international border, while India continues to raise the cost for Pakistan, hitting back at Pakistani forces and striking deep into Pakistani territory, even taking our crucial air defense systems. Now, in a significant move in the recent IMF meeting, India has objected to the $1 billion bailout for Pakistan, saying the funds are being used for terror operations. India has abstained from the vote and the IMF has taken note of that. So India is saying that all the funds that are going to Pakistan from the IMF are only funding the terror operations. Case in point, the Pahalgam terror attack and Pakistan's offensive against civilian areas inside India. Now, joining us on the broadcast to get a global perspective on this entire matter, I'm joined by Lisa Curtis, strategic expert and senior fellow and director of the Indo-Pacific Security Program at CNAS. Thank you, Ms. Curtis, for joining us on CNN News 18. How do you see these developments coming in between India and Pakistan as the border tends to remain hot and Pakistan continues its offensive against India in the wake of the Pahalgam terror attack, even though several nations have backed India's stand as well as offensive in taking out the terror infrastructure inside Pakistan?
Well, I think we're in a very dangerous situation. The situation is escalating. And, on Wednesday, the hope was that after we saw the Indian retaliation for the April 22nd terrorist attack against the terrorist infrastructure inside Pakistan, and Pakistan claimed that it had downed 5 Indian aircraft. The hope was that things would de-escalate, that the two sides would find a way to walk down the escalation ladder and establish dialogue, establish contact with one another, and establish dialogue to be able to walk back from the brink of conflict. However, yesterday, the action across the line of control continued with drone strikes, with missile strikes. There's an unclear situation exactly what's happening at the moment because there's a lot of misinformation circulating on social media, and there's a lot of different statements coming from each side. So the hope is that we start to get some clarity from each side on what is exactly happening and how the two sides can stop the exchange of military action that's happening, and how we can establish peace and calm in the region. This is the utmost need of the hour.
Right, but Ms. Curtis, given the current defense paradigm and the skirmishes between the two sides and the significant technological as well as the big difference in defense capabilities between the two sides, how do you see it play out given India's technological edge over Pakistan, be it air defense or be it even striking deep within Pakistani territory?
So India exercised its right to self-defense when it struck Pakistani infrastructure on Wednesday. What has been happening since then in the last 36, 48 hours is very unclear because Pakistan has claimed it's downed 5 Indian aircraft. India has not acknowledged this. India has claimed that Pakistan has struck military installations inside India, or has attempted to do so. And that is why India said that it retaliated by targeting Pakistani military sites inside Pakistan.
Right.
So again, the situation is escalating. It's getting out of control. We're in the most serious situation, I would say, that we have been since the Kargil border conflict in 1999. So I think that right now, the sense is both sides need to find a way to engage with one another and find ways to stop the military activity that's happening and reestablish calm in the region. And, the U.S. does have a role and a responsibility to play in this situation. The U.S. should be on the phones talking to the leadership, talking to the Chief of Army Staff, Asim Munir in Pakistan, and talking to the Indian leadership in India, the National Security Advisor in India. So my hope is that we see somebody like Secretary of State Marco Rubio working the phones, trying to de-escalate this situation, because nobody wants to see an all-out war in the country, that could potentially go nuclear.
Right, and Marco Rubio has been in contact with the leadership on both sides, Ms. Curtis. But I want to press you on that point you just ended on. How real is the nuclear paradigm between India and Pakistan, given the fact that Pakistani leaders have only been saber-rattling using the nuclear weapons narrative against India, saying, even warning India as well as the world, where the defense minister even went on to say that either Pakistan exists or the whole world gets destroyed?
Well, I think it is real. Look, anytime two nuclear armed states enter a conflict, one has to be concerned about one using those nuclear weapons. Look, I think the ultimate concern would be a situation where one of their red lines is crossed. And of course, India has a no first use policy in place. Pakistan does not. So there are concerns that if Pakistan feels like its existence is being threatened, a situation like in 1971 when Pakistan was basically split in two and you had the East-West or East Pakistan turned into Bangladesh. I think if the Pakistanis felt a similar situation was happening in their country, that they could potentially resort to nuclear weapons. And once you start up that escalation ladder, you lose control and it becomes a tit for tat, and each side keeps trying to increase their response And you can see how things quickly get out of control. So I think, we have to take seriously the possibility. It may be a remote possibility, but I think we try to dismiss this possibility at everyone's peril, and it has to be taken seriously.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Curtis, for sharing your perspective on the situation currently at the border. Now, you and several experts have also said that de-escalation is the most prudent way forward. Thank you for sharing your perspective. And up next, my colleague Akanksha Swaroop takes us forward with the latest news and updates.
All right, we're just getting some breaking news before we close out the show. There's been a massive blackout followed with
A very warm welcome to our live and rolling coverage of the border tensions between India and Pakistan, as India gives a befitting reply to Pakistan's misadventures and even displays its technological edge. Pakistan continues its drone strikes along the border, targeting several spots in Indian territory. Pakistani forces have unleashed drones in Jaisalmer, Rajouri, Amritsar, Firozpur, Riyasi, Katwa, Samba, Nagrota and even Uri. Ceasefire violations are continuing along the line of control and even the international border, while they are also raising the cost for Pakistan as India continues to retaliate. In the recent IMF meeting, India has also objected to the bailout for Pakistan, saying the funds are being used for terror operations. India has abstained from the vote and the IMF has taken note. That's a big breaking input we are now bringing to you as far as putting or exerting that pressure on behalf of the IMF is concerned. Let's in fact bring you those breaking inputs. Top government sources are telling CNN News 18 that as far as IMF clearing a $1 billion bailout for Pakistan, India has abstained from the recent International Monetary Fund vote. This was with regards to the loan that was being doled out to Pakistan, not because it lacked opposition, but because the fund does not allow member countries to vote no. Otherwise, remember, India was all set to vote and cast a negative vote, but this time around, India has abstained. By choosing to abstain, here's the message. India has sent a strong message of disagreement. It has raised concerns over Pakistan receiving repeated financial support 28 times in the past out of 35 years, including 4 programs in just the last 5, without any meaningful reforms coming from these global economic institutions, primarily the IMF. India has also criticized the Pakistani military's deep role in economic matters and warned that the money could be misused to support cross-border terrorism, posing serious risks to global credibility and values. On that big breaking input, I'm joined in by Siddhant Mishra, who will break down that big message that India has sent out while abstaining from that very crucial vote. Siddhant, first of all, many would want to know, why hasn't India cast a no instead of abstaining?
This is where India demands reforms at the international institutions. In fact, talking about IMF, if you allow me, then I would like to draw a larger context to this particular development. So there is no vote policy at IMF. Perhaps a country with more economic might has more say, and in fact, decisions are largely taken on the basis of consensus. So India does not, India cannot, or any of the members cannot exercise no to the bailout, and this is a reason that India decided to abstain. Perhaps the IMF has also of India's abstention. And it is kind of a message which India is sending out to the world that, India has provided evidence, material, time and again. India has raised this issue that a country which is surviving on IMF bailouts perhaps is spending equal amount of money for its defense budget, says about the priority of that country, etc., etc. And today again this happened. India, in fact, this issue was raised. India's abstention was also taken note by the IMF. But, as I said before, that again, this is where India demands reforms at the international institutions. Perhaps the terrorist state, which is directly involved in killing 26 innocent people, last month on 22nd of April, perhaps is again getting loans from IMF. In fact, because the bigger countries with the bigger economic might have supported this bailout again.
That's very important, Siddha. I'm going to request you to continue staying with me. In fact, I'm joined in by Professor Chalani at the moment for more perspective on this. Professor Chalani, thank you for joining in. This is a big development, as Siddhant was highlighting and sharing the reasons why this is an abstention and not a no. Also, break down for us, how do you weigh in on the statement, which is a very sharp and pointed one that's come out from India?
First, this IMF bailout approval has followed a staff agreement with Pakistan. So the right time to lobby with IMF was when IMF staff were negotiating with Pakistan. At that time, we did not raise a voice. What happened today was a pro forma approval. Once a staff agreement has been reached with the country, the IMF board normally, unless there is something extraordinary that comes to the notice of the board of the IMF, the board normally approves the staff agreement. So the lobbying should have been done much earlier. At this stage, it was very difficult for India, even with US support, for example, to block the staff agreement with Pakistan. The US administration, the present one, is quite India-friendly. They know that Pakistan is deeply involved in terrorism. The right thing to do would have been to lobby in January, in January or February, to prevent such a staff agreement from being reached. But actually, it goes back to the Biden era. When Joe Biden was the president, he began this bailout process for Pakistan. There was a big bailout that he helped secure for Pakistan. And then soon thereafter, he announced a $450 million deal to modernize and upgrade Pakistan's F-16 fleet against India. Look at the irony of it. On one hand, the US under Biden pressed IMF to bail out Pakistan because it was bankrupt or on the verge of defaulting. And then they signed a $450 million deal to modernize Pakistan's F-16 fleet without securing any commitment on counterterrorism. And even at that time, the Indian government did not raise its voice. So, we have a record of only raising a voice when there is a crisis that is facing India. So today, because of this military conflict, we spoke up, but it was too late.
Thank you for making that very critical point, Professor Chalani. And I want to, also ask you about the entire statement that has come in. Do you think that statement is hard-hitting? Even though it is hard-hitting, as you said, that we seem to have already missed the bus at a time when there's a lot of chatter about how we can exert pressure on Pakistan through these monetary institutions, whether it is the IMF or even make efforts to bring Pakistan back on the FATF grey list. How is this move in your point of view?
I think India needs to mount a sustained international campaign to spotlight Pakistan's nexus with terror groups. This tendency in India to speak up when there is an act of Pakistani-sponsored terrorism, or there are tensions along the border or the LOC, that's not the right way. You have to do it on a sustained basis. You have to then press each institution. For example, the FATF allowed Pakistan to exit the grey list. At that time, India could have built a coalition. Of course, the Biden administration, along with China, helped Pakistan to exit the FATF grey list. But you have to start building a coalition months ahead. And you can't do it just when FATF is meeting. Similarly, in the case of IMF, you can issue any statements that you wish to make. But to pressure IMF, you have to build a coalition. You have to build a coalition because India is only one important country in the IMF. It doesn't have a veto power in the IMF,
Okay.
but certainly can help build a coalition.
You know, that's another very important point that you've made, Professor Chelani, and that's the point that I would like to take forward with Lieutenant General Iyer, who's also on the broadcast with us. He's the ex-chief of the staff at Northern Command, and I'm also joined in by Captain M.J. Vinod, who's a defense expert. Many thanks to you, gentlemen, for joining in. But if I could bring in Lieutenant General Iyer, sir, that's an important point that Professor made, and that's why if you go by the consensus, as they say, that unlike the UN over here, as far as the IMF is concerned, the vote goes by the economic power that each country wields, which means that the United States has a significant sizable vote in the IMF. What is one to make at a time when the United States is maintaining consistent engagement with New Delhi? Should we expect or shelve any hopes from the US to play a critical role over here?
Firstly, I will take it, Professor Chelani took it back to January. I'll take it back to August, September of last year.
Okay.
It was around that time when, they got out of the FATF grey. They were one of the major contributors of ammunition to the Ukraine requirements, which was something which Biden administration was pushing. So they were like Biden's gang at that stage of time. And by the time the elections happened in the US and the new administration came in, and it was too late because this IMF bailout had already passed that staff test. Thereafter also, till the month of April, there was no other significant reason for us to start pushing for putting them on a grey list, as well as, getting this bailout out. So to some extent, we have been trying for the last 2 weeks, but 2 weeks is not an adequate amount of time. And let us have trust in the current American administration. They are well abreast with the kind of activity that is happening in Pakistan. I am personally very sure that next time when it comes up for the FATF relisting, Pakistan will find itself into trouble. My only piece of concern is 2 weeks down the line, though we have accused Pakistan of this Pahalgam incident, we have to back it up with real concrete evidence.
Yes.
That is somewhere we need to work much harder. We have to connect the links between what happened in Pahalgam to the Pakistani administration. And by the time they come up for the next set of loans, it should be very clear that Pakistan is a country which is fostering terrorism once again, and they deserve to be treated in the manner they were treated last year. And the third thing I would say is $1 billion in the current scheme of things, we should not get too much worried about. I'm sure it is just maybe another 6-7 days of war stamina if you equate it towards completely being employed towards this war waging efforts. And should this conflict go any further north and we find ourselves into a limited or a long-drawn engagement with Pakistan, this $1 billion is not going to last it. So let us not get worried about it. Let's stay focused on the current situation. I still agree, and I keep saying this every time, whenever I get an opportunity, the I part of the time syndrome, we have not doing so well. We have not been able to communicate our intentions correctly. Whereas we have done very well on the diplomatic side, we have done exceedingly well on the military side, we have done fairly well on the economic side. Because the communication aspects are not good enough, we are not able to get the kind of results that we should have got by now.
No, I agree over there. I agree over there. But where I do disagree is that $1 billion funding, as you're saying, may not result or yield too much of war stamina. But the fact is, it's not just this $1 billion bailout that we are looking at, or an additional funding, which is what they are calling it, because there's been a consistent sort of bailout pattern that's been coming out of IMF, and that goes all the way back to 1958. And that's why I want to bring in Captain Vinod on that note. Sir, there's so much chatter about how the global consensus is standing with India in solidarity. And so when you talk about that global consensus, will that yield any results, especially in a body like IMF, which is governed by consensus?
And listen, without sounding very different from my position, for the sake of viewers, let me explain this particular thing to you. See, a professional, I don't want to use that word, but for want of a better word, I'm using this word. A professional beggar knows exactly how to dress up before he goes begging. So in FATF, when you go to take the money from IMS and not to get into FATF grey list, Pakistan has done a large amount of work. Before you go and submit your application, Pakistan knows exactly whom to go and meet, what to say, how to say, Germany, US, before it goes to IMF. To stay out of grey list, he knows Pakistan doesn't need to go knocking on the doors of US. It needs to go knocking on the doors of Australia. Why? Because in the FATF, we have something called an APG, Asia Pacific Group. In the Asia Pacific Group, the permanent chair is Australia, and you have a rotating co-chair. And the Philippines, and last year when they got out of it, it was Malaysia, and they had a tacit understanding that when you have a bailout, you will return what is owed to Malaysia, which they didn't return. And if you remember, that big thing happened when PIA Airlines was captured by Malaysia. Because they promised that paisa will be given, paisa diya nahi, aur yahan inko ullu bana ke chale gaye. So these kind of things, a professional person who knows how to ask for arms knows very well. I was not surprised that they will get this money because they have done their homework very, very well. For the next bailout, they have already started their work. And for the next to next bailout, they have already must be doing their paperwork. So they're extremely professional about it. And like Professor Baramulla Chalani said, you have to beat them in their game. You cannot be, beating them in their game 1 day to go, 2 days to go. Nothing is going to happen. By calling somebody 1 day before the money is going to be allotted and hoping like hell that the money will not be allotted when professionally he has addressed and plugged all the holes a month ago, impossible to do. But my limited point is, in the last 3-4 days, the amount they have spent is much more than the amount that they may get. And it is not that FSTF sanction, aaj hua hai, you will get money today. No, it takes 1 month, 2 months to come into your account, and when you start spending. So that itself is something which is not going to aid in this particular operation.
No, I agree with you that they do their homework and they do it bloody well. But Professor Chalani, I think the example that's been quoted of FATF is living testimony, because remember, they convicted a Sajid Mir or even a Hafiz Saeed only till the time they wanted to get off the grey list of the FATF. Once they did, they were back to their proxy games of terrorism. And that's why I want to bring you in on that point, that why haven't these global monetary institutions like the IMF or the World Bank been able to do much when it comes to addressing terrorism? I can't help but ask that, are they not equally responsible for what we are seeing happen in Kashmir?
The thing is that as long as Pakistan does not export terrorism to the West is actually not concerned about Pakistan exporting terrorism to India, because then it becomes a regional issue for them. And in an old India-Pakistan problem, where the two have been at loggerheads for decades now. But they all know that over the years, the footprints of many terrorist attacks in the West were traced to Pakistan. The US found Osama bin Laden living next to the Pakistan Military Academy, and other top terrorist leaders that the US wanted, like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed or Abu Zubaydah, they were found living in Pakistan's heartland. But then under previous US administrations, the Pakistani government, especially the ISI and the army chief, promised to Washington that they have started cleaning up their act, that they will never repeat what happened previously. They pledged that they will not do anything to undermine US or Western security. So with those assurances and pledges, the US under some administrations, for example, under Biden, resumed cozy ties with Pakistan, and we saw how Biden, for example, really helped Pakistan secure the first IMF bailout, then managed to get Pakistan off the FATF grey list, helped modernize Pakistan's F-16 fleet, while we didn't really press our case at that time. We did not. We were being too nice. We thought that if we were to exert pressure on the Biden administration, this could strain U.S.-India relations. No, we should have actually said that what Pakistan is doing is a threat to global security, and that India's efforts to pressure Pakistan to clean up its act is actually good for the world. It's not just an India-Pakistan issue. It's actually about international security. The IMF bailout, and this is there was a big bailout that was initially supported by Biden administration, and
Yes.
now we are now in the second bailout.
Yes.
But the IMF bailout is actually great leverage for the U.S. because, as you rightly point out, that the U.S. has a virtual veto power in the IMF, and Pakistan needs the IMF bailout, not just because of the amount of money, because the IMF bailout allows Pakistan then to secure loans from elsewhere. For example, this latest release of $1 billion, this immediate release, $1 billion are being released to Pakistan
And
now.
we all know where it's going to go.
Yes, but more importantly, because of this $1 billion deal, Pakistan now will be able to secure additional billions of dollars from Saudi Arabia and China. They were waiting, China and Saudi Arabia were waiting for this IMF agreement. And now $1.2 billion swap deal with China will go forward, and there will be another major package from Saudi Arabia.
All right, I think you've made another very critical point, Lieutenant General Iyer. How do you weigh in on that? That actually does sound alarm bells at the moment, because as we've been talking about, India has also stated it in the IMF that the Pakistani army, the military, has a lopsided sort of sway over the economy in Pakistan and how the funding is going to be utilized. So that indeed is a cause of concern now, even if it is just going to be slightly over $1 billion.
I can't agree more with Professor Chalani. It's covered almost all the facets of this bailout. My only point here is whether this bailout came or not. The funds flow from both China and Saudi Arabia, if not through the front door, from the back door, would have continued. But this does give them legitimacy to now push through loans. These are ultimately loans. Like Pakistan, somebody said, Pakistan budget is, every budget tells us what is to be repaid and where the loans are going to come to repay the next year's, next year's budget. So it is a kind of a continuation they are living in. They are living in dangerous situation. No country would like to, have so much of external debt as Pakistan is. Their economy is in shatters. A war of maybe even 15 days is going to make their life miserable. They just cannot afford it. And I am very sure this 1 billion, like Group Captain Augustine said, it is not going to be of much use. A couple of jets going down and this $1 billion worth will, get covered over there. Possibly in the last 4 days, they have taken losses more than $1 billion as it is. But that having said, unfortunately, we are making Pakistan India-centric. And that is something we need to tell the world that the problem is not just going to be in India. Tomorrow, this epicenter of terror is going to bite everybody. Somebody said, keep snakes in your backyard and they're going to come and bite you. This point has to be rubbed into the Americans. 9/11 happened because there were people who were, raised by the Americans in the 80s. They came back and bit them in the late 90s. The same thing can happen through Pakistan in some stage of time. This has to be told to the Western world, and that's why, again, I said we have to be much more active in the info domain. We have to be ballistic in the info domain. Our people should be able to communicate the points of view, our troubles, and also tell the world what is going to hit them later. We can survive, but will this be harmful to the world has to be told. And the last point I would like to add here is possibly in the later half of last year and early part of this year, we were too focused on China. Our entire interest was trying to find a way to de-escalate with China because it was running into the third or fourth year. We were still worried that this is something which, and possibly we neglected Pakistan as possibly something which is not of importance to us.
Okay.
And I guess because I remember I've been in service and in an operational command, and we were literally only focused towards the north, and we're not looking in the west at all.
Okay,
I guess,
Captain Vinod, I want to bring you in. Lieutenant General Iyer and Professor Chelani both have highlighted how India's homework should have begun much earlier, and perhaps we had distractions at the LAC as well, which perhaps kept us more focused on China front. But now that the Biden administration is gone, you have an administration which is more serious about tackling terrorism, something that we can stand by with the arrest or the extradition of Tahawoor Rana. What, in your view, could sort of perhaps expedite the US support when it comes to, tackling or exerting greater pressure via institutions like the IMF?
Great question. In fact, just tell the viewers, their foreign office, the Section Affairs office equivalent of ours, has a separate division which is looking at only IMF loan bailouts and the paperwork and everything. There are a whole lot of people working in that particular department who are only looking at this. Now, let me draw a simile because I'm being a military man. You say you stay across Amritsar, they deploy one division or two divisions of force. Will you keep quiet? You will also deploy one or two divisions of force, isn't it? Similarly, in our External Affairs Ministry, we should, maybe they will learn a lesson. We should have a separate division continuously working to get these buggers into grey or blacklist, all the time. Career, officers should be working permanently to get these guys, give the guys what they deserve, which is blacklist. Else, it is going to bite us badly. And like Sir said, a couple of years went by when we lost focus on Pakistan, which is we are paying dearly for it. And I'm mincing no words. Even today, I think we are not giving it back to them as much as they deserve it. We can and we should, is my feeling. But then there are better brains taking better calls, so I'll leave it to their judgment. Otherwise, what we are seeing on the screen, we should not be seeing on the second or third day.
No, I agree. Why were we waiting for a 22nd of April for the situation to have arrived to this point? But Professor Chelani, take a moment to weigh in on the reliance that Pakistan has had on the IMF, which goes, I will again say, it's gone over for decades. 1958, I have the entire list of all the bailout fundings that have gone. And it all began in 1958, 8th of December to be precise. And I can't help but say that, if it is about snakes in the backyards, when will they stop, in fact, harboring these snakes in the backyard? You expect better from the Trump administration.
Two things stand out. This IMF bailouts for Pakistan began during the Cold War, when Pakistan was a surrogate of Western powers. So it was easy for Pakistan then to secure IMF bailouts. And once you get one bailout and you don't do your reforms, you become more and more dependent on IMF. Let's say, getting IMF money is actually quite slippery for many countries because IMF imposes conditionalities that are pretty tough. And once you get into the IMF bailout trap, you continue to you continue to need more and more bailouts. And this has been Pakistan's story. And the second is that over the decades now, since the first coup in Pakistan in the late 1950s, which actually coincided with the first IMF bailout. Pakistan has been ruled formally or informally by the military continuously now. And the military dominates not only the society, it dominates the politics, it dominates the economy. There are very few countries in the world where the military not only calls the shots in politics, but even the shots in the economy. There are very few examples of this kind in the world. So Pakistan is a very unique case. It's an abnormal state where the military and the intelligence agencies are not even accountable to the government in office. For example, today, the way the military operates, Shahbaz Sharif is only the surrogate of General Munir. So this is a very abnormal state, and that's the reason why, to answer your question, this dependence on bailouts has never left Pakistan.
Absolutely. And Lieutenant General Iyer, we are looking at a year which is very critical to some partnerships that India has, and we'll be playing host to the Quad Summit. And when you talk about it in such a year, is this partnership with, say, Japan, Australia and the United States of America only limited to the Indo-Pacific?
Unfortunately, the Quad is only limited to the Indo-Pacific and it is China-centric. I'm making no bones about it. That having said, I am looking at a brighter year ahead for three, four reasons. Firstly, the Russo-Ukrainian conflict is almost as good as gone. I guess it's just a period of time when the Americans, because the Trump administration is not going to be as actively involved with the Ukrainians as the Biden administration was. So I see that part of the world order changing in the coming part of this year. So Pakistan's value in supporting Ukraine and being part of the American setup will go down in due course of time. The second thing which Pakistan has done over the last 1 month, and they have been somewhat been able to play it down below the radar. They have been trying to reignite the Middle East by pulling out the Palestinian clause once again. Even I saw even during the PSL games, they had these save Palestine kind of things coming up, or crush Israel kind of things being taken up. I guess we did not catch that. They had wonderful opportunity to play it up, but we did not.